Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining today's web conference, Moving to Work Demonstration Program Cohort to Webinar. Please note that all participant lines will be muted until the Q&A portion of the call. We will provide you with instructions on how to ask a verbal question at that time. You are also welcome to submit written questions during the presentation, and these will be addressed during Q&A. To submit a written question, please use the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen, choose All Panelists from the Send To drop-down menu, and submit. And with that, I'll turn the call over to Marianne Nazaro, Director of Moving to Work Office. Marianne, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Lindy. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Marianne Nazaro, and welcome to the Moving to Work Demonstration Program webinar, specifically relating to Cohort 2. Again, I'm Marianne. I'm the Director of the Moving to Work Demonstration, and with me today is Paul Joyce, Research Analyst in the Policy Development and Research Office, and we are really excited to be here with you this afternoon to talk to you specifically about the MTW expansion and the second cohort of the MTW expansion. Before we get started, I just wanted to run through a couple of brief logistics for the day. As Lindy had noted, we will have a couple of breaks during today's presentation where you will be available to ask questions, and specifically during Paul's presentation, we are really encouraging questions and dialogue as we're looking for feedback, so we look forward to hearing from you. Also, all of these slides will be made available on our website after this webinar, and we are recording the webinar. We posted to the website at hud.gov/MTW. And if you have any questions at all relating to the Cohort 2, you can email us at mtwcohort2@hud.gov, and we also keep our website up to date. During today's conversation, Paul and I are going to talk about the MTW expansion specifically relating to Cohort 2, and I will first provide an overview of MTW and Cohort 2, and I'll provide you a little bit of background as what is moving to work, a little bit of overview of the expansion in Cohort 2, and then you'll hear from Paul when he'll dive into the specifics of the Cohort 2 rent reform evaluation, and he's looking for some feedback from you, and we'll have a good conversation there. And we're also hoping to answer any questions that you might have. So that's kind of how the flow of today's conversation will go. So as we now get started, I'd like to just take a step back and just talk about what is moving to work. Hopefully by this point you've all had an opportunity to review our website, take a look at the webcast that we posted there as well relating to moving to work. Generally, MTW is a really great tool for housing authorities to help them address their local community needs. MTW provides housing authorities with the flexibilities to design and test specific, locally designed housing and self-sufficiency programs that are really different from the one-size-fits-all that non-MTW agencies have to follow. MTW allows housing authorities to have exceptions of certain sections of the 1937 Act, of Section 8, of Section 9 rules, and MTW also enables housing authorities to use their public housing and voucher funds flexibly. So public housing funds can be used to provide vouchers to family. Housing choice voucher funds can be used towards services or development. MTW, there's 3 statutory objectives for MTW relating to housing choice, self-sufficiency, and cost-effectiveness, and everything that an MTW agency does has to fall into one of these 3 housing statutory objectives. There's currently 39 MTW agencies across the country, and they've done a lot of really great things with moving to work. They've simplified their rent calculations. They've partnered with service providers to provide more housing and more kind of targeted housing to at-risk customers. And they've also been able to use their MTW funds in creative ways and to help towards developing affordable housing opportunities. And the department over the years has used MTW to learn from MTW and to inform the rest of industry. So you'll see a lot of the recent changes that HUD has provided to all housing authorities relating to the streamlining rule and HOTMA in 2016. a lot of these types of flexibilities really were born out of moving to work agencies. So, for example, MTW agencies have been self-certifying assets under 5,000, well before the streamlining rule was in effect. That MTW agencies have been are to update their recertification schedule for families and those types of things. So what we really try to do with moving to work is to learn from the MTW innovations to help inform the industry nationwide. And as I mentioned earlier, there's currently only 39 housing authorities that are designated as moving to work currently. In 2016, Congress authorized HUD to expand the moving to work demonstration to 100 additional public housing authorities, and we are really excited for this expansion. With this expansion, Congress is requiring HUD to test a specific policy change within each cohort of agencies that we bring on, and the Congress also required us to convene a research advisory committee to advise HUD on what policy changes we should evaluate in the expansion and how we should evaluate those policy changes. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. In the 2016 Appropriations Act, there were also a lot of selection requirements that were put into place. Congress gave us 7 years to designate, so all 100 new agencies will be designated by 2022. The new MTW agencies need to be high performers in either FAS or CMAP, and they need to represent geographic diversity. In addition, Congress required specific size limitations. So of the 100 new agencies, half of them will have to have either 1,000 aggregate combined public housing voucher units. About 47 of them have to have between 1 to 6,000 combined units, and 3 can have between 6,000 and 27,000 combined units. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, Congress, with the expansion, is requiring us to study a specific policy change with each cohort that we designate through the MTW expansion. We convened the advisory committee. We've had several calls. We had one 2-day in-person meeting. And through those meetings, the advisory committee has provided us 4 specific policies to test and gave us advice as to how we should evaluate that. So first is just MTW as a flexibility, where we would randomly select up to about 38 agencies from that smallest group of agencies under 1,000 units and compare their outcomes with agencies that weren't selected. That's for cohort 1, and there's a separate letter of interest, interest notice that was published for that cohort. Today we're talking about cohort 2, which is rent reform, and Paul will talk a lot more specifically about that and what that evaluation might look like. Cohort 3 will be work requirements, and we'll be coming out with a letter of interest and selection on the cohort 3 and work requirements later on this year. And then cohort 4 will focus on landlord incentives, and we will anticipate to publish the notice related for later on next year. And so with today we specifically want to talk about the cohort 2 of the moving to work expansion, and really make sure that you understand what we put out in the notice. On I want to say Thursday, a couple of Thursdays ago, on March 14th, we published PIH Notice 2019-4, which we also refer to as the Request for Letters of Interest Notice for Cohort 2. This notice lays out the 2-step application process by which PHAs will be selected for this second cohort of the expansion. Again, the second cohort is going to evaluate rent reform. This Notice 2019-4 is specifically inviting PHAs to submit a letter of interest. Those letters of interest are due on June 12th of this year. With that letter of interest, the agency shall also provide the documentation of a board resolution, and they also will need to take a baseline survey prior to that June 12th date. Once we get those applications, and Paul will talk a little bit more about that, we will work through with the evaluator in developing the selection notice for this Cohort 2. So we'll publish a separate PIH notice specifically inviting those eligible PHAs that submitted their letter of interest. We'll provide a separate selection notice later on this year that will invite those agencies that are eligible to submit full applications for this Cohort 2 under rent reform. And so before I turn it over to Paul, who's going to dive into the details of that, I'm going to ask Lindy if you could please open it up for questions, and if you could let people know how they might be able to ask questions and see if I can answer that.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, as we move to Q&A, please press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted, and at that time, please then state your name and question. And additionally, to submit a written question, please use the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen, choose All Panelists from the Send To drop-down menu, and submit your question. And we'll give everyone a moment. Okay, and at this time, we do not have, actually, we do have a question that has just jumped into queue.
Okay.
And caller, your line is now open.
Yes, I see in the PH notice 2019-04 that housing authorities that are converting to TBRA, that this may affect their participation in RAD. Our housing authority, we were previously Public and Indian Housing and Housing Choice Voucher. We're a regional PHA covering a 10-county area. We have already previously converted to PBRA with our public housing, but we are interested in converting our Housing Choice Voucher program to Moving to Work. Would we still have the ability to convert our Housing Choice Voucher program to Moving to Work, even though we've already converted our Public and Indian Housing units to RAD?
Sure. So MTW only covers the Housing Choice Voucher units. MTW cannot be used for the PBRA units.
Yes.
So any units that had converted over to PBRA could not be covered under MTW.
Right.
The Housing Choice Voucher only units would.
But it wouldn't stop us because we've already done a RAD conversion with our public housing units. That wouldn't kick us out from exploring this cohort. Is that correct?
Right, as long as you've got over 1,001 combined units of Housing Choice Voucher. Those PBRA units would not count towards that count.
Okay, thank you.
And I do see there's a couple questions in the chat, so I'm going to try to address that. Does the letter of interest to be accompanied by the board resolution? And again, following the requirements in PIH Notice 2019-4, yes, a board resolution needs to be included as that. And then, so there's also a question, how long will eligible PHAs have to complete the full application when the second notice is published? And that information will be included in the selection notice once that's published. So when meeting the 1,000 unit requirements, deportants count. So we will be running the eligibility as to however many units that you have as of June 12th, 2019. Do RAD converted PBV units count towards, do RAD converted project-based voucher units count towards the 1,000? The answer there is yes, but again, RAD converted PBRA units do not. Is there any exception to the high performer status? Again, you need to follow the requirements that are detailed in the notice that states that they need to be high-performing in either FAS or CMAP. That was a requirement that came from the statute, and there is no exception to that. So then there's a question about what is the third component of the letter of interest. There's the letter of interest, there's the board resolution, and then the third piece is relating to the baseline research survey, and you can find more information on that on page 9 of PIH Notice 2019-4. -4. So the question is, if we're selected for Cohort 2, can we apply for other cohorts in the future? And I don't know why you would want to be applied to another cohort in the future. If you're selected, then you're selected into Cohort 2, and then that is the cohort that you're a part of. If you're not selected for Cohort 2, you can still apply to Cohort 3 or Cohort 4.
Marianne, can I chime in?
Yeah.
On that last question? I just want to make sure people understand that being a part, by the way, this is Paul Joyce, PDNR. I just want to make sure people understand that being a part of Cohort 2, which is, of course, focused on rent reform, does not mean, for example, that you would not be able to do landlord incentives. There are some restrictions on the activities that you could do in particular cohorts, but they're not necessarily exclusive.
Great, thanks, Paul. And then there's a question here about, can you explain how the decision on geographic diversity is determined? And for the purpose of Cohort 2, that's not really a part of the factor. That we're looking specifically in this one. We do describe how we are looking at determining geographic diversity when we have in the letter of interest notice for Cohort 1, which is PIH 2019-3, and unfortunately, I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me right now, but I would refer you to 2019-3 to see how we were will be determining the geographic diversity. And then this next question I'm going to ask Paul to respond to is the baseline survey the same between Cohorts 1 and Cohort 2?
No, they're not the same. The Cohort 2 survey is quite short.
And then the question here is, can we see the questions in the baseline survey report ahead of time? And those questions should be posted to our website under the, I believe they're in the FAQs on our website right now, so those are available on our website in a PDF form. Are there any, Lindy, are there any other callers?
Yes, and we do have further questions in queue. And caller, your line is now open.
Hi, this is Linda Bridge with Albuquerque Housing Authority, and I just had a follow-up question to the answer you gave before about the different cohorts, and maybe this is a little premature to ask, but I kind of had a similar question that if we were more interested in, say, landlord incentives and rent reform, do we wait to apply, or is it better to apply for each one we're eligible for, I guess, strategy-wise?
So the details relating to the landlord incentives cohort aren't going to be published until later, probably early 2020. So that said, you know, if you're interested in becoming MTW, like we currently have the letter of interest notice is published now. Like I would encourage you to submit. You know, you put your hat in the ring for Cohort 1. That said, if you are designated as a Moving to Work program agency through Cohort 2, then you are required to follow the Cohort 2 evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and we do have another question in queue. And caller, your line is now open.
Hi, my question regards the models under the tiering. And if a person, the way I understand it, has a hardship, and let's say the hardship is accepted, can instead of leaving them in the traditional method of calculating rent, can we put them in one of the other rent categories, like the 5% to 3% or something?
Paul, is that something that you're going to talk about in your part of the presentation?
Yeah, I think so. In fact, I was going to suggest that maybe we should move into my part of the presentation because it seems like the questions are starting to veer into that territory, and we will have more time for questions later.
Okay, that works for me. And so we did see there were a couple other questions in the queue that Paul will probably address as part of his presentation, and if not, then we'll come back to those in the next question break. So Paul, it's all yours. All right, great. And do I have control? I do. Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. Paul Joyce, Office of Policy Development and Research. I'm going to start off by talking about giving some background on HUD's motivation for using Cohort 2 to test rent reform. The status quo rent policy, known as the Brook rent, sets rent for each household at 30% of their adjusted income, and as you know well, PHAs often complain that Brook rents are complicated and burdensome. Brook rents are also believed to create negative incentives for HUD-assisted households. If your income goes up by $100 per month, your rent goes up by $30. That implicit tax is 30%, which is pretty high as far as marginal tax rates go. So it's reasonable to think that HUD-assisted households would earn more money if they did not face that rent penalty, and that is precisely one of the things we're interested in testing. But, of course, there are very good reasons for income-based rents. HUD-assisted households have very different needs, and income-based rents ensure that each assisted household is paying a rent appropriate for their income. So our objectives with rent reform are to remove or mitigate that 30% so-called HUD tax, but also to minimize hardships. We want to reduce administrative burden, and we want the average effect to be budget neutral so that the PHA can serve the households at the same overall cost. And these goals often pull in different directions, but we believe it is possible to balance these objectives. And in Cohort 2, our goal is to design a few alternative rent policies and to implement them in a way that will allow us to conduct rigorous research. So I think this will answer one of the questions we got. Each PHA that participates in Cohort 2 will implement one alternative rent policy alongside the status quo. So there will be no mixing and matching between, say, a tiered rent and a stepped rent. You're going to have one alternative rent policy. And then assisted households who are eligible will be randomly assigned to one or the other. And we have an independent evaluation team that will study the alternative rent policies to see whether they have their intended effect. So, let's see. So this has also come up in the questions. Marianne already mentioned the 1,001 or more units requirement. There's also a requirement that a PHA have 1,000 or more eligible households. Eligible households are those that live in public housing or have a voucher, excluding special purpose vouchers, and eligible households may not be elderly or disabled. A primary objective of rent reform is to increase earnings, so we want participating households to be those more likely to be able to work. And the 1,000 eligible households requirement is necessary for research to ensure that we have an adequate sample size. So to go ahead and answer one of the questions we got in the chat queue, I'm not sure I understand exactly what Rachel Wood is asking. You might need to follow up in writing, but eligible households would be occupied households.
households occupying a unit minus these exclusions for special purpose vouchers, elderly, disabled, so on. So an unoccupied unit would not count if that's what you're asking about. All right. Okay, so there are two types of rent policies that we're interested in testing. We've started talking about tiered rents and stepped rents. Both of these were recommended by the MTW Research Advisory Committee, but there are many different flavors of these rent policies. And HUD intends to use the selection process to refine the policies to be implemented. So we didn't want to tell PHAs precisely what you must do, but we also didn't want to let each participating PHA define their own policy because that would create too much variation that would cause a lot of problems for our research. So the first step in the process is for HUD to propose sample policies and invite your feedback, and that's exactly what we're doing now with interest. So we've laid out 3 sample rent policies, which I will talk through, and in your letter of interest, we invite you to tell us what you think of them and tell us what you'd be willing to implement at your PHA. There's also a fourth option whereby you could propose your own policy, which I out towards the end of the call. So we'll look at the letters of interest that we receive and consider changes to the rent policies and then publish the selection notice with the final policies so that by the time a PHA is selected for Cohort 2, HUD and the PHA should be on the same page about exactly what is going to be implemented. Another benefit to this process is that we should have multiple PHAs implementing each rent policy. That's good for HUD's research. We also hope it's good for the PHAs because you'll have a peer group going through the same process, and we expect it will produce efficiencies related to data and IT system modifications. All right, so into the rent policies. We'll start with the tiered rent, which is fairly simple. In this policy, you set tiers or income bands of $2,500. So each household would be assigned to the tier that corresponds to their adjusted income. For example, any household with income up to $2,499 would be in the first tier and would pay a minimum rent of $50. The table on your screen is just an excerpt from the full table. It would continue in $2,500 increments up to the eligibility cap for your jurisdiction. Within each tier, the tiered rent would be set to be affordable at the midpoint of the tier, and every household in the tier would pay the same rent. So if you're a HUD-assisted household making $6,000 per year, you're in the third tier, and your rent is $156, you could increase your income up to $7,499 and not face any rent penalty. But then if you earn $1 more, you go to the next tier, and there's a pretty substantial jump in your rent, and that is why this policy also includes triennial recertifications, so that if you do advance to the next tier, that substantial rent hike would not take effect immediately. You'd have a little bit of a lag, which we hope mitigates that potential disincentive. But ultimately, this policy is not primarily focused on incentivizing tenant earnings. It's more about simplification. Relative to Brook rents, we expect that this would require much fewer recertifications. Obviously, annual recertifications go to triennial, but we also would expect fewer interim recertifications. So this would hopefully reduce the administrative burden for your PHA. Moving on to stepped rents. The basic idea of a stepped rent is that each household's rent will increase or step up each year independent of their actual income, but that's a very broad concept. You could have very small annual rent increases, perhaps simply equal to inflation, or you could set large annual rent increases, hypothetically. I believe one current MTW agency has a stepped rent that jumps up each year by 20% of HAP, which is effectively a 5-year time limit. But in between those two ends of the spectrum, it's tricky deciding how to set the exact parameters of a stepped rent, because you have to balance these 3 objectives. You want to give tenants an incentive to increase their earnings, which removing the 30% rent penalty should help. But you also want it to be budget neutral. And because tenant incomes and rents tend to increase over time, if you were to simply implement a flat rent, over time your budget would likely deteriorate, so the step rent needs to step up. But if it steps up too fast, then you're going to create tenant hardships. And so, yeah, we have to try to balance these three objectives. And that's what HUD has tried to do with the two step rent policies that we've put out. So both of these two step rent policies are based on fair market rents to account for local housing prices. Both of them involve the creation of a rent schedule based on unit size and FMR. The steps are defined as a percentage of the FMR, and each household would be assigned to a step for new households that would be at the time of admission, and for existing households when they transition to the new policy. And that initial step assignment would be based on their income, so that we would ensure that at least at the beginning of the step rent, each household is at an appropriate level. But then after the first year, the rent would step up according to the schedule. So this, the first stepped rent has steps equal to 5% of the fair market rent. There's a lot of information packed into this table, so just focus on the one-bedroom column in the middle. This is a hypothetical stepped rent schedule for a PHA with an FMR of $1,000 for a one-bedroom unit. Step 1 is 15% of the FMR, or in this case, $150. And with each step, the one-bedroom rent increases by 5% of FMR, or $50. There are 18 total steps, and step 18 equals 100% of FMR. So imagine two sample households. One starts out with an annual income of $6,000 per year. That equals a brick rent of $150. So that would put them at step 1. These are households that would be in a one-bedroom unit. So $150 brick rent matches the $150 step 1 stepped rent. The next year, this household would go to step 2, and so on. And if this rent policy were implemented permanently, this household would face an 18-year time limit, basically. But another household is fairly high income by HUD standards. They start out making $36,000 a year, which is a brick rent of $900, so they would start out at step 16. And it would take them only 2 years to advance to the maximum step in the step rent schedule. So we know that HUD-assisted households tend to have volatile incomes, and that is the biggest challenge with the stepped rent. When you create this long-term schedule for rent increases and people's income changes, you can have some challenges. So it's very important to have a hardship policy, and there are two provisions focused on this. The first is a full hardship. This would apply if a household lost their job or had a substantial decrease in income or increased costs for specific reasons. And in such cases, the household would be reset to the step that matches their current income. So if I'm at step 6 and I lose my job and have 0 income, I would go back to step 1. And then the next year I would go to step 2. So it's, in a sense, a permanent reset to where you actually are. But the second hardship is simply a 1-year rent freeze. So if I'm at step 6 and my income is stable, but it's not keeping up with the step increases, I could request the limited hardship and simply get a 1-year freeze before continuing to step 7. The second stepped rent policy, okay, there we go, is it has the same basic structure with steps based on the FMR, but the biggest difference is that the steps equal 3% of FMR instead of 5%. So, and the first step would also be lower, only 8% of the FMR instead of 15. And then because the steps are smaller, there are more of them, 25 in total, and the final step does not go all the way up to 100% of FMR. It caps out at 80% of FMR, which is effectively a shallow subsidy. And finally, the one-year rent freeze hardship would be available multiple times. Here's the schedule to help visualize that. You see the, again, this is for a PHA with a one-bedroom FMR of $1,000. So 8% of the FMR at step one is $80 rent for a one-bedroom, and then it goes up by $30 per. So it's a pretty big deal to have the step 25 equal a shallow subsidy. In some places, market rents are just so high that an assisted household might never reach the point where they can affordably rent on the private market, and so under this policy, they would be able to continue receiving a small subsidy on an ongoing basis. Let's see. Let me run through real quickly. These are some provisions that apply to both stepped rents. The stepped rent schedule should be updated periodically. FMRs change, of course, but we don't want to update the schedule every year. So instead, we propose that it would be updated every 5 years with your PHA plan. Recertifications or reexaminations would happen every 3 years, but of course, they wouldn't be used to set rents. They would be focused on confirming eligibility and household composition. Unit changes can change the rent, but not the step. So, for example, if somebody moves from a two-bedroom to a one-bedroom, then their rent would change. But if you think of the tables that I showed, they would be shifting to a different column while staying in the same row, the same step. Voucher households would also potentially change their rent if they moved and their gross rent or payment standard changed. And finally, households will, if a household can affordably rent a unit at the FMR, they will exit assistance. So these are the three policies that HUD has come up with, and we're willing to consider changes, but we also invite you to propose your own policy with some constraints. First is it must be a tiered rent or a stepped rent, and it also must have a hardship policy. And you must have 4,000 eligible households to propose your own policy. Recall earlier we talked about the eligibility requirement of 1,000 households. Well, this is a higher threshold because if you're going to create your own policy, then we have to conduct a separate analysis just for your policy. So unless you have 4,000 households, we don't think we would have adequate statistical power for our research. There's a big caveat here, though. If your PHA alone doesn't have 4,000 eligible households, you could team up with another PHA to implement the same policy. That is effectively what HUD is attempting to do with our sample policies. By putting out one particular tiered rent, we hope to have several PHAs doing the same tiered rent. So if you're going to do your own policy, you might need to team up with other PHAs. But both PHAs would have to independently be eligible and selected by HUD, and you would operate your program separately. You would just have to coordinate implementing the same policy. As for the rent policies themselves, if you want to propose your own tiered rent, there are only two constraints. The tiers can't be too big or too small, and you can't set the rents within each tier at such a level that effectively everybody in the tier would have a rent burden above 30%. As for the stepped rent, if you want to propose your own, the first requirement is that you start each household at a reasonable level. HUD has proposed that each household start at a step that matches their income at that point in time. We wouldn't want you, for example, to start all households at the same step. The second requirement is that the maximum step must be appropriate for your market. So if you have a very high cost market and you want the final step to be a relatively deep subsidy, you can do that, but you have to make the case that it's appropriate for your housing market. And then finally, you can't step from the lowest step to the highest step in fewer than 9 years. So if you think of a person with zero income starting out the stepped rent, we wouldn't allow a policy that would have that person progress up to a market rate, a market rent, or to a loss of their assistance in fewer than 9 years. So that is all I have. And then I think we are going to pause for questions here to talk about the rent policies before handing it back to Mary Ann to talk about the schedule and or any wrap-up.
Lissy, this is Mary. Could you please open it up for questions and remind people how they could submit questions or comments relating to the presentation that Paul just provided?
Absolutely. And so if you would like to enter the question queue, please dial #2 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted, and at that time, please then state your name and question. We'll give everyone just a moment.
And while we're waiting for people to call in, Paul, there's a question here. Are hardships only allowed once, or can they keep claiming hardships and resetting their steps?
So I believe what we put in the request for letters of interest notice is that the 5%, well, I believe that under both of the stepped rent policies we've articulated, the full hardship would be available as many times as needed. If a person were to repeatedly lose their job, we wouldn't want to preclude them from having the stepped rent adjust to account for their situation. I will just note that hardships are very tricky. There's a balance between wanting to accommodate the very real likelihood that some households, that people's incomes change, but also wanting to prevent possibilities where the hardships could be taken advantage of. And so we are open to suggestions, particularly about how to structure those hardships.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Another question is, how would these proposed alternative rents affect the PHAs that are currently participating in the small area FMR demonstration?
You want me to take that?
Yes, please.
It's because it's not an easy one.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought about whether or not the stepped rent would be appropriately based on the FMR or the small area FMRs. And basing it on small area FMRs would significantly increase the complexity, and it could also potentially distort the behavior of households in a way that is not the intent. It's hard to explain what I mean by that, but in short, the small area FMRs are used to set the voucher payment standards. The stepped rent is different, and we recognize the potential confusion that it could cause, and I think it might be helpful to remove FMR from your thinking about the stepped rent. Take the FMR for your jurisdiction and replace the numbers in any of the tables I presented with actual dollar amounts. So instead of looking at 15% FMR for the step one rent, just plug in the number for your jurisdiction and then leave it at that, and just think of it as dollar amounts going forward. That might help with the confusion.
Okay. And then another question is, how do we figure out the started rent for the stepped rent options? So can you say again how people, like where the first rent is when people first come in?
It would be based on the household's income and the brook rent that they had been paying. Specifically, it would be rounded down. So if somebody's paying a brook rent of $153 and the stepped rent, the lowest step is $150 as it was in the table that I presented, then they would go down to the closest step that doesn't increase their rent.
And then a clarification on that is how do we figure out the beginning rent for participants that are already on the program, that are not new participants? Same thing.
Yeah, same thing.
Okay. Another question, will PHAs that opt to take any of the options receive higher priority in the MTW application process than PHAs that opt to implement just one of the options?
Marianne, I don't think that we have commented on that or could comment, right?
Yeah, and again, at this point, we are just looking for PHAs to submit letters of interest as of June 12th. From there, we'll determine eligibility, and we'll invite eligible applications to submit a full application. And then all details of that application will be included in the future selection notice for this cohort number 2.
Right, and actually now that I think about it, I think that we want you to be candid in your letters of interest, and so if you actually only would be willing to implement one, then please say so, and if it turns out that there is no PHA willing to implement a particular rent policy that we've proposed, then we need to know that before the selection notice.
Right, because Paul, isn't part of the purpose for this two-step process is for us for HUD to understand what interest is out there for different rent models. Right.
Marianne, I want to take a question that's in the chat. Someone asked whether it's possible to incorporate work requirements to the rent reform. The answer is no. Earlier I said that you could regarding the idea of applying to different cohorts, I said, well, you could participate in rent reform and also do landlord incentives, but you could not do work requirements. The request for letters of interest notice identifies a couple MTW activities that would be unavailable in Cohort 2, and our reasoning there is that they would conflict with the rent reform itself. And you might dispute my characterization of conflict. You might think that they work in the same direction, but we want to know specifically what effect the rent reform has, and if you're implementing rent reform and work requirements, it would make it impossible for us to know the relative impact of each of those activities.
Okay. And then, Paul, another question here, just to confirming a previous question. If the PHA states in their letter of interest that they would be interested in doing 1, 2, or 3 of the rent models, when selected, does the PHA choose which one of those 3 will actually implement?
Yes, I think that, well, I don't know, Marianne, I'd turn that back to you. I assume that when we put out the selection notice, we'll clarify the instructions for finalizing a specific rent policy.
That's right. And the selection notice will identify the actual rent policies. Are there any other callers?
Yes, and we do have callers in queue. One moment. Caller, your line is unmuted.
My question concerns the ability to do waivers if there is a hardship. And you mentioned on that slide other expenses. What can you clarify what that means, and or does the PHA determine what they are in the MTW plan?
I'll take that one. So on page 14 of the request for letters of interest notice, we have the exact language related to this, and I believe it's common language that we cribbed from another HUD source. So regarding other expenses, the specific, it says because of changed circumstances for medical costs, child care, transportation, and so on. And it also says such other situations and factors determined by the agency to be appropriate. So there is some flexibility built in there for the PHA to determine when a hardship is necessary. Okay, do we have more caller questions?
Yes, and we do have another question in queue. Caller, your line is now open.
How you going to ask it? How does the step-up affect the tax credit properties?
That is not something that I've considered.
What did you say? You didn't consider it.
I don't know the answer to that one.
Yeah, we'll have to address that question through the FAQs. I think that what I heard is the question is how would the stepped rent model affect tax credit properties?
So I assume that you have a property that's vouchers and tax credit.
Have to do recertification for income qualification. Yes.
I think we would need to look into whether or not it would be possible to include residents of that property.
Okay.
I see a couple of chat questions. Let's see. I just want to clarify that the rent reform eligible households would not be disabled or elderly, so there is no treatment of rent reform for elderly or disabled households. HUD is planning to provide financial support for updating software. Our evaluation contractor has part of their budget to account for that, and I believe that is discussed in the request for letters of interest notice. And yeah, let's see if there are any other calls.
At this moment, there are no further questions in queue.
So there's another question in the chat relating to, will Cohort 2 agencies be allowed the other MTW benefits such as funding flexibility? And the answer is yes, that all of the MTW flexibilities will be available to agencies in this Cohort 2 unless they're otherwise specified in this letter of interest notice. And so these agencies will be able to use their funds flexibly as well. There was a question here about will we be able to adopt a tiered rent structure for existing participants who are elderly and disabled or have a special use voucher? And the answer is no, not as part of this rent reform study. And under the tiered rent protocol, do you still apply to all the standard deductions and the rent calculation to determine which tier the tenant is placed in, Paul?
That's one that we thought about quite a bit, and as of right now, our proposal is that yes, you would. That the tier assignments would be based on adjusted income. Our reasoning was, to be frank, not to change too many things, but we understand that PHAs often want to change the deduction structure. So feel free to share your opinion on that. Marianne, regarding the last question, I just want to clarify that the tiered rent structure for elderly or disabled, HUD has no intention of using a tiered rent structure for elderly or disabled as part of our Cohort 2 rent reform study. Whether or not you could do it separately, I think we would need to consider that and get back to you.
And then do you still have the 40% restriction at initial lease up under tiered rent?
Sorry, what's the question?
Do you still have the 40% restriction at initial lease up under the tiered rent?
I'm not sure what that's referring to. Perhaps the 40% rent burden cap for voucher households? I don't know the answer to that question. We'll have to get back on that.
And did we consider eliminating the utility allowance?
I would say that is similar to adjusted income versus gross income. We thought about it and are not proposing it right now because it would just be another complication and another thing to change.
So this next question looks to be more kind of MTW general. Can you use the funding flexibility inherent in moving to work to use voucher funds to supply social services to residents in both public housing and voucher programs? And also say to use public housing funds to provide social services to provide residents in both programs. And the answer to that question is yes, as long as that, there's still a requirement that agencies continue to serve the same number of families that they otherwise would, but as long as that requirement is being met, that funding flexibility means that the MTW agency can use their voucher or public housing funds to provide any eligible activities under, activities that would otherwise be eligible under Section 8 or Section 9.
So regarding the 40%, Jason Spencer, thank you for clarifying your question. That is what I thought it was. That reminds me of something else I should point out, which is that whenever we've talked about a tiered rent or a stepped rent, that when you think about the voucher program, that is sort of the base tenant contribution. If a tenant is choosing to rent a unit above the payment standard and they have that incremental share that the family is responsible for, that would go on top of the tiered rent or the stepped rent. I know that doesn't directly answer your question. I think we're going to need to get back to you on the 40% initial lease up, but I wanted to clarify that one thing.
And then another question that we saw earlier was, what is Cohort 3 going to study? And I'll refer back to a prior slide that the future cohorts will evaluate work requirements and landlord incentives. Those were the recommendations that we heard from the Moving to Work Advisory Committee, and we've decided to implement those recommendations. So we will be studying work requirements and landlord incentives in cohorts 3 and 4. What at this point we're envisioning cohort 3 would be work requirements, cohort 4 would be landlord incentives, but that may change, but the policies will remain the same. Okay, so then with that, I'm going to, again, if you have any other questions on this, please visit our website, and you can click on the Cohort 2/rent reform link, and we have a lot of good information there for you. The notice is included there, again, Notice 2019-4, an FAQ document that we update regularly, including we'll update it with a number of the questions that we received on today's call. There's an Excel document that's an eligibility worksheet that you can kind of fill out yourself to see, do you meet the eligibility criteria that's listed in the notice. And we're also linking to all of the attachments and standard forms. So we encourage you to take a look at the Cohort 2 website. And so where do we go from here? So later on this year, we will be publishing the final Moving to Work operations notice. And we will be designating that initial cohort of agencies and inviting the second cohort to apply. And we'll be, it looks to me like this timeline. So where are we going from here? I'm going to replace this timeline from what we put on the website. And so what we will do is we will be, later on this spring, we'll be publishing the final MTW operations notice for Cohort 1. Yeah. For Cohort 1, we will be inviting those letters of interest are due in May, and the final applications we'll be inviting those agencies to apply in July, and we'll be announcing those Cohort 1 selectees later on this calendar year. For this Cohort 2, these letters of interest are due in June, and we anticipate it will work with our evaluator based on even the letters of interest, and we'll publish the final selection notice later on this year, later on this fall, and those agencies will be designated next summer. And then, again, look for Cohorts 3 and Cohorts 4 later on this year and early next year. And with that, I'd like to see if there's any other questions.
At this time, I will remind callers, if you do have any last questions, please dial #2 to enter the question queue. And we will give that just a moment.
All right. In the meantime, there is a question. Is it possible to receive more than one cohort? Again, once you receive your designation under moving to work, you will be designated under that cohort. So if you receive designation under Cohort 2, that is the cohort that you're under. You would not be eligible. If you're designated under Cohort 2, you would not be eligible under Cohort 3 or Cohort 4. You would be a Cohort 2 agency. But you can submit your letter of interest for Cohort 1 or Cohort 2, and if you're not selected, you can continue to apply for Cohort 3 and Cohort 4 when those come out. And we will be updating the PowerPoint, and we will be making that available to the website very soon. So, again, just suggest that you keep referring back to our website to see our FAQs. If you do have any further questions relating to the MTW expansion, if we could go to the next slide here, to remind you how you can reach us, check out our website at hud.gov/MTW. You can email us at mtwcohort2@hud.gov. And again, the slides will be made available to the website in the upcoming days. So there's another question about if you are in Cohort 2, can you take advantage of landlord incentives? And the answer to that is, if you're in Cohort 2, you can take advantage of any of the MTW flexibilities unless they're otherwise noted in the letter of interest or selection notice. And so please, refer to the letter of interest and selection notice. And so, again, for landlord incentives, yes, you'd be able to participate in any landlord incentives as long as they're not otherwise noted in the in the notices.
So let me also answer this question about reports, or I'll answer it more generally. What kind of what's the responsibility of the PHA for participating in the evaluation? We have an evaluation contractor, an organization known as MDRC, and they have a variety of subcontractors who will work with you. We expect that they will be very helpful in a lot of ways with preparing to implement the alternative rent policy, adapting your IT systems, and so on. There will be some burden. You might be asked to participate in telephone interviews. The evaluation contractor will probably be in touch with you on a somewhat regular basis, how implementation is going, and so on. But if you're asking about specific reports that you would need to submit to HUD, that's a different question that I would defer to the MTW office.
Sure. So what Paul was just describing was specific reporting as it relates to the evaluation. For all expansion agencies, they will be reporting to a supplement to their annual PHA plan that's currently going through the PRA process, and you can find more on that again on HUD's website. We put that that document was available for public review I guess back in October as part of the PHA plan, and we'll be putting it out for public comment again in the upcoming weeks. So I would encourage you for overall reporting to the MTW expansion. I would refer you to the MTW PHA plan supplement, which is currently undergoing a PRA process right now. And with that, are there any other callers on the line?
At this time, there are no questions in queue.
Right. So with that concludes our presentation this afternoon. We really appreciate everybody for your time and your interest in the Moving to Work demonstration. MTW really is a very unique tool that is used for MTW agencies, and I encourage you to work closely with your boards, with your residents and stakeholders to really think about whether or not moving to work makes sense for you. And I really encourage you to provide your letter of interest for this Cohort 2, and we look forward to hearing from you. So thanks very much, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you so much, and thank you, everyone, as that concludes today's conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Conferencing Enhanced. You may now disconnect.